Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing how to set up a recycler view in Android Studio to create a scrollable list of images and text. The images and text I'll be using for this demo I'm actually borrowing from the Android Basics in Kotlin course from Google. The link to this is in the chat, so you can find the images and text that I'll be using, and I'll be following pretty closely along these two code labs here. Use RecyclerView to display a scrollable list and display a list of images using cards. So at the end of this, you'll know how to set up a recycler view in Android Studio and how to add images and text to create a scrolling list on the screen on an Android device. So the first thing that we need to do is to actually create a list of text that will pull into the recycler view. Before we actually create the recycler view, we need some data that we will be working with. So I'm going to start by setting up some strings in my project. I just have a new empty project here in Android Studio. If you create a new project and choose empty activity, and so then we're going to go ahead and edit our strings file, which is down under the res folder and values and then strings.xml. So this is my strings file. So I'll be adding some new strings here. The only one here right now is the app name, which I have called positive affirmations. A little hint of what's going to be coming. So these are going to be some affirmations that you might tell yourself. So I'll call the first one affirmation 1, and then the actual text for this is I believe in myself. So that's a positive affirmation. Let's add a few more in here, and this one will be affirmation 2. I am strong. And now, rather than typing all of these out, I mentioned I am using the strings that are from this code lab from Google. So here is the list of all the strings. And so rather than typing all of these out by hand, I am actually just going to copy and paste the rest of them and bring those back in here to Android Studio. So now I have 10 affirmations, and so now I'm ready to set up a recycler view and pull these texts into display on the screen. Now this project is going to have a number of different code files, and so to keep things organized, I'm going to create a few different folders or packages, as they're called, in Android Studio. So I'm going to create a few different packages as subfolders so that I can keep my code organized. So I'm going to locate the folder that is my main project folder here. Yours might appear all on the same line, com.example. And then whatever you named your project. But I have mine split out just so I can see them separately. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to choose new and then package. And then the package, it automatically fills in the first part of this, which is you'll notice this is the folders above in the hierarchy. So com.example. Positive affirmations and then whatever I want to call this package. So for organizational purposes, I'm going to have a package called model. This is how we will model our data. So I'll create a folder or a package called model. And now I'm going to make a new class. I'm doing this demo in Kotlin, so I will be creating a Kotlin class. You could also create a Java class if you were writing this in Java, but I'm going to create a new Kotlin class file, and this is going to be called affirmation. And I want to keep this selected as a class, and I'll just press enter. And so now if I open up this model folder, now I see I have an affirmation class. Right now it's just a normal class, but I actually want to set this to be a data class. I'm going to use the keyword data here. I want this to be a data class because it is going to be for working with data. And you'll see when you type this in that it gives you a red squiggly line. And if you hover over that, it'll say data class must have at least one primary constructor parameter. So I am going to go ahead and give this a primary constructor parameter right now. I'm going to pass it a val called string resource ID. And this is going to be an int. So this is going to be an int that I will use to represent my string resource ID. And I actually don't need the open and close curly brackets for right now. So next I'm going to create one more package folder. So I'll go here and create a new package. This is still in my project folder, not underneath model. So I'll create a new package folder here. And this one is going to be called data. And this is for actually holding our data source. So I'm going to go ahead and create that new package now. So now I have a model folder, and inside of that I have an affirmation data class. And then I have a data folder. Now inside of here, we are going to create another new Kotlin class. And this class I am going to call data source. Now in here, I am going to create a function called load affirmations. And this is going to be used to load in my list of affirmations. So I'm going to put here list of affirmation. So remember, affirmation was the first class that I made. So this function is going to return a list of that type, the type affirmation. So what's going to go inside here? So I need to return a list of affirmations. So I'm going to return list of. So this is how you create a list in Kotlin. So you type list of, and then you type the type of items in that list. So this will be affirmation. And then in open and close parentheses, and then inside of these parentheses, then the list of the actual items themselves. So for each of these, I'm going to create an affirmation, and I'm going to pass it an ID. So this will be our string dot affirmation 1. So that was the first affirmation in my list. So that's where this this ID here. So this is going to find each of the affirmations from my strings file. And so I'm just going to copy and paste. So then my second one will be affirmation 2. And I would just continue doing this all the way through affirmation 10. So these are my 10 affirmations, each one separated by a comma. So this is creating a list of objects of type affirmation. So just to quickly test out everything that I've set up so far, if I go to my activity main XML file and locate my the default hello world text, it does not currently have an ID, so I'm going to give it an ID. I'll just give it the ID text view with a lowercase t, capital V, so that I can refer to this from my main activity Kotlin file. I'm going to access that text, and I'm just going to display how many items I have in my affirmation list. So in my main activity Kotlin file inside of onCreate, so this happens first right at the very beginning when the application is first launched. And so here I'm going to locate, I'll call it this text view, which is of type text view. And I'm going to use this to locate find view by ID to find that text view, which is on the layout. So that is this text view right here. And so I'm going to locate that text view, and then I'm going to say text view dot text equals data source. So this is my data source class that I created right here. And so I can do data source dot load affirmations dot size, and then dot to string, so that I can make it a string for displaying it in the text view. So this is going to just make sure that our load affirmations function works correctly and that it creates instances of these affirmation objects, and it's just going to tell us how many it created. So I'm going to go ahead and run this on my emulator, and it'll take a moment to boot up, and then I'll be able to see if it worked. All right, so my app loaded up. Here's the name of the app up here, Positive Affirmations, and it changed this text to say 10. So it did correctly load in my affirmations, and it found 10 of them. So when it created this, it created 10 items, and that is the length of my list. So this verifies that everything I've set up so far is working correctly, and so now we have some data to work with, and we are ready to set up our recycler view. Okay, so we can go ahead and get rid of this text view that we have set up in our Kotlin file. We're not going to use this, and that was just for testing our setup. So now I'm going to move to my activity main XML file, and right now it is just a constraint layout with a text view that says hello world, but we're going to switch this to be a frame layout, which is what you would typically use to set up a recycler view. And so to do this, I'm going to switch to my code view here, and I'm going to start by getting rid of the text view. I don't need that. And so what I have right here, right now, I have the constraint layout, and I'm going to change this. And so I want most of this default stuff to stay here, this XML and S. I don't want to change those, but I do want to change my constraint layout. I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to change this to frame layout, and you'll notice that it updates my close tag as well. So it changes the open and close tag to say frame layout, and I actually want everything else in here to stay the same. So leaving match parent for width and height, and the tool's context as main activity. So I've not changed anything except converted my constraint layout into a frame layout. So next I'm going to add a recycler view to my layout, and you can either do this directly in the XML or you can do it in the design view. So here I am in the design view, and if you look at the common items in the palette up here, so we can select the recycler view, and we can actually just drag it into our layout, and it will automatically align itself over here to the top and the left side. So I'm going to change the ID for my recycler view. I'm going to give it an ID of recycler view. So recycler underscore view. So this is the ID now for my recycler view. And for this next step, I'm going to go back to my code view and take a look here. Now we have the recycler view widget appearing here in our layout, and we can see our ID here as well. And so the thing that I want to add to this now is something called a layout manager. So I start typing and I can find it down here at the bottom. So app layout manager, and I'm going to set this to linear layout manager. And it populated all this extra text here before linear layout manager, and you don't really need that, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So it just says linear layout manager. Next, I'm going to add a scroll bar. So this will be Android scroll bars, and I'm going to choose a vertical scroll bar. Now, some folks like to keep their XML files organized and keep things categorized together, so you could move this scroll bars up so that it is collected with the other Android attributes. So now, if we want to run this now just to make sure that everything works and nothing is broken, nothing interesting is going to be displayed, but we can just test it to make sure that it still opens up. I already got rid of my text view, and so this has an empty recycler view in it. It is not displaying anything, but the recycler view is there. So next we need to create some XML files for the individual items that are going to go into our recycler view. So this XML file is for the whole main activity, and we are going to make some we're going to make an XML file for individual list items. So I'm going to go down here to under my res folder under layout. I'm going to right click and create a new layout resource file, and I'm going to call this list item with an underscore. And so now I have a list item XML file. And I'm going to switch to the code view. And we don't actually need a view group, a parent for this, because this is going to be pulled into the main activity XML file. And so we can just put a text view by itself. And I'm going to use actually, let me undo that. So I actually do still need this line right here. So I'm gonna again replace the constraint layout, and so here I'm going to make this a text view, and I'm going to change match parent to wrap content for both the width and the height. So it's not stretching it to fill the whole screen. So match parent would stretch it to fill the whole screen. So instead we want to use wrap content. I do also want an ID for this. So I'm going to give it the ID item title. So now I have just a text view here, and then I have an ID, and then I have layout width and layout height set to wrap content. So now we're going to make another Kotlin class for what's called an adapter, which we're going to use to actually bring in the individual items into the recycler view. So I'm going to make a new Kotlin class. I'm actually going to make a new package for this one as well, and this package is going to be called adapter. And so you'll notice now we have three package folders. So we have the data, the model, and the adapter. So now inside of adapter, I'm going to make a new Kotlin class file called item adapter. And this class for its constructor is going to take a val called dataset, which is going to be of type list of affirmation. And notice as I'm typing that in that it adds the import line to bring in my affirmations, my affirmation class as well. So I am taking a list of affirmations as the parameter for the constructor. Now I actually need to pass it one other piece of information, and I'm actually going to add that before the data set. So I'm going to pass it a context. So the context gives it some information about important things it needs for displaying things like strings. So the context that it's in has information about how things should be displayed within that context. So I'm going to pass it a context when I am creating instances of it. Now, I'm also going to create a class inside of here called item view holder, which is going to have a reference to the individual image view, the individual views that it needs to access. So that rather than having the recycler view accessing items directly, it will have a holder that will hold the information for each of those views. So now this item view holder is going to take as a parameter, it is going to take a view, and it is also going to extend from a parent class. It's going to extend from RecyclerView dot view holder. So the RecyclerView dot view holder parent class, it also needs a view to be passed to its constructor. So I'm going to pass it this view here. And so this is going to give us access to the parent class attributes and functions available to us with the view holder parent class. Now inside of this class, I am going to create a text view. And this text view is going to be for find view by ID. This is going to be for the item title. So this is the item from the XML file. So that is this item title right here. So that is what this text view is looking for. It's going to look for the item title in the XML file. Now, one last thing I'm going to add to my item adapter class, similar to how my item view holder extends from the RecyclerView.viewHolder, I'm also going to have my my item adapter is going to extend from the RecyclerView.adapter class. And the adapter needs a type for the view holder, and so this is going to be, the type is going to be item adapter dot item view holder. Now my line has gotten pretty long here, so I'm going to go ahead and add a new line here just so that it can spread it out just a little bit. And I need to add the open and close parentheses to the end of this. All right. Now we can see that there is a red squiggly line under item adapter, and if I hover over this, it says this class is not abstract and does not implement abstract base class member, and then it explains some things here. So since I am extending from an abstract class, the RecyclerView.adapter, I need to implement its members. So if you, when you're hovering over this, if you click implement members here, and we can select all three of the ones that it wants us to implement and click OK. Now it fills those three in, and so it just gives us the structure, the outline, so that we can then fill in the implementation of these functions. Now the easiest one is the get item count, so I'm going to start with this one. So for this one, we just need to return our dataset.size. And so this is going to be how many items we have in our data set. And so that will be item count. So that's the easy one. So next I'm going to implement on create view holder. Now what we want to do in this one is we want to create an adapter layout. And this is going to use something called layout inflator, which as the name implies, it inflates a layout. So it takes something from one XML file and fills it into another layout XML. So we'll do layout inflator dot from, and we're going to go from parent dot context, and then we're going to do dot inflate. So this is the step where we actually inflate the layout, and we're going to here use r dot layout dot list item. So this is the list item XML file that we created, and so this is what we are going to inflate into the recycler view. And so then we also need to pass it a view group. So I'm going to pass it the parent view group, and then the last thing that it is looking for is attached to root boolean, and so I'm just going to put false for this. Now this line here is also a little bit long, and so we could create a new line here so that we can make a little bit more space. Now I have a red squiggly line here because I'm not returning anything, so I do need to return something here. So I'm going to return the item view holder, which I will pass the adapter layout. And so I set up this adapter layout using the layout inflator, and then I pass it to the item view holder. And then I return that in this on create view holder function. So the next one that the last one that I need to implement is on bind view holder. Now notice that this function takes a integer as a position, and so I'm going to use that position. So we're going to have an individual item from our data set at whatever position is passed as this int. And then I'm going to update my holder text view So the holder, which is passed here, is of type item view holder. So that's this class that I made right here. And you see that it does have a text view there. And that text view refers to the item title in the XML. So you can kind of see how these things are all linked together. So this holder here has a text view. And so that text view, I'm going to access its text attribute. And I'm going to set this text equal to now I'm going to use context here, which is the context that I said would be passed to the item adapter when we create an instance of it. And so this context has information about how text should be displayed. And so we want to know what context we are in when we are creating this item adapter. So this will be context dot resources dot get string. So get string takes an ID. So the ID that we want to pass it here is item.string resource ID. Now you might recognize that string resource ID from the affirmation class that we created. So that's this string resource ID here. And so that is the ID that we are going to pass to get the string that we want to refer to. And then we drop that into the text of our view holder, and that is the item view holder that is referring to the item, the list item XML file. So we're sort of stringing all these things together so that we can pull the text in and display it as the individual items on the screen. Now, the last thing that we need to do is back in our main activity Kotlin file, we now need to actually set up, like previously we were setting up just applying to a single text item on the screen, telling it how many items were in our list. So now we actually need to set up our list to display in the recycler view. So in my main activity Kotlin file, I'm going to initialize my data. I'm going to call this my data set. So this is going to be data source dot load affirmations. And so this will be the data set that I am using. And now I need a reference to my recycler view, which will be find view by ID. Now I do actually in this case need to specify the type that I'm using. I didn't need to specify it before with the text view because it was simple enough that the Kotlin was able to figure out what the type should be. But in this case, I do need to specify that recycler view is the type that I want to use for this find view by ID. And now I pass it the ID of my recycler view, which is this first one right here. So that is the ID in my main activity. So that's the recycler view's ID. So now I have a reference to my recycler view, and now I can set up the adapter. So I'll do recycler view dot adapter equals item adapter. Now the item adapter needs two things. It needs a context, and so I've mentioned this a couple of times. So we need to know what context we are in order to be able to display things correctly. So I'm going to pass this as the context. So this refers to the current context we are in. And then I also need to pass it my data set, which is the set of data that we are going to use to display in our recycler view. And now the last thing that I'm going to add down here at the bottom, this is just for performance, but I'm going to add recycler view dot set has fixed size to true. And again, this is just for improving performance. But now I have everything that I need in order to run my recycler view. And so I can go ahead and hit play and see. It'll take a few moments to load up, but then I'll see it in my emulator. All right, so here are those affirmations from my text file. Now, I can't scroll this because there's just not very many items here. But if you want to see that the scrolling does work, you can just increase your font size. So let me stop this for a moment. And if I go to my list item, so now here I can change my text size. And let's try 26. SP, scalable pixels. So I can make a pretty big font size. Let's see if this is big enough so that I can see if my text will go off the screen so that I can scroll. All right, so now I can scroll and you can see that the text wraps around because I chose wrap content, and so it wraps the text around, and because I made the font so large, so now I can scroll. This will be more clear once we add in the images, and then we'll have a lot more space to scroll through, but this just lets us test out to make sure that the recycler view does scroll properly. I know there was a lot of steps to set this up, but now we have a really flexible recycler view. And so in the next few steps, we can easily add in images. So first we need to go and find those images, and I'm going to be using, again, the files that are included in the link below in the description. So you can go to the link below in the description. That's where the text and the images come from. So we need to go ahead and import those images, and you can also import your own if you have your own images to work with for this. But I'm going to go to my resource manager, and if it doesn't appear here on the left hand side, you can also find it from Tools and Resource Manager down here, about 2/3 of the way down. And so in the Resource Manager, then you can choose the plus to add new resources, and we're going to choose Import Drawables. Then you're going to browse to wherever you downloaded those images or any images that you want to use for this. So I'm going to select those 10 images, and you'll see it shows a little preview of each of them. And then we'll choose Next, and then we'll choose Import. And so now we have all 10 of these images appearing here, and they also appear in our project view under our drawable folder. So now these images are ready to use, and we are going to pull those into our recycler view. So we're going to hop back to our affirmation class, and we're going to add onto this. So right now it's taking the string resource ID as an integer, and we want to take a second ID, this time for the image. But in order to distinguish these, because both of these are going to be an integer, so we can add an annotation in front of it to make it more clear when the function is being called, which one, what order they should go in. Since they're both integers, it's possible to cause confusion. So I'm going to add an annotation that says string res, and it automatically imported that annotation up at the top there. And so I have string res for the val string resource ID, and I'm gonna separate these onto multiple lines since the line is getting a little bit long here. So I'm going to add a new one for the image, and so this is going to be I'm going to do drawable res, and this is a val, and I'll call this image resource ID, and this is also going to be an int. So now I have my affirmation class set up to accept not only a string but also an image. So now we'll need to update in a couple of places to account for this. So let's go to our data source Kotlin file, and here where I am calling my creating instances of my affirmation class, I now have a red squiggly line letting me know that I cannot make this call to create this affirmation. So I need to add the new parameter that I created in my affirmation class. I need to add a ID for the image. So I'm going to add r.drawable.image1, and I need to do this for all of them. So I'm just going to copy and paste so I don't have to type it over and over again, and I'm going to update the numbers. So I'll first add these all the way down, and I'll update these numbers. So it's 2, 3, all the way up to 10. So now I am creating instances of affirmation using both a string and a drawable. So it has the ID for the string, which again is in the strings file, and then it has the ID for the drawable, which is over here in our drawables folder. So now we need to add our image view into our list item XML. And so right now this just has the text view, and I am going to add around the text view, I am going to add a linear layout. And I want to make sure to close the linear layout down here. And so for my linear layout, I'm going to move this XMLNS. I'm going to move this up to the linear layout. This should go around the outside part. And then for my layout width, I'm going to use match parent. And for my height, I'm going to use wrap content. And my text view now, it doesn't need this extra tag down here anymore, so I'm going to just move that inside there. And the other things that the linear layout needs, it also needs an orientation. So I'll just start typing that in, and I'm going to give it a vertical orientation. And since it auto-populated the layout width and layout height for me, I do need to specify Android in front of each of these. And that should get rid of all of the red squiggly lines. And then we can also indent our text view. Typically, you'll indent things within your XML view so that you can tell which things are child view of the group, the view group above it. So we have our text view, and now we're ready to add an image view here. So I will add an image view, and I'm going to choose match parent for the width, and for the height, I'm actually going to specify a height. I want all of my images to be a uniform height, even if they come in at different sizes. So if you use images of different sizes, this will allow them to be a consistent height in your scroll, in your recycler view as you're scrolling. And so I'm going to set this to 194 dp. dp is the density independent pixels, which we typically use for images and for spaces between things. All right, so I also want to give this an ID. I'm going to give it an ID of item image. And we can also add this important for accessibility. So this is whether or not the image has important information on it that needs to be read by a screen reader. And these are just decorative images that go with the string. So the string of text is the important part for the screen reader. So the image is just decorative. And then lastly, we're going to add a scale type of crop center. And again, this is to make sure that regardless of what size our images come in at, they all end up appearing uniform in the recycler view when they are displayed. So lastly, we need to update our item adapter, and we are going to update our item view holder to also include an image view. So we'll add val image view, and this is of type image view, and we will again do view.find view by ID, and the ID for our image view is r.drawable.item image. Sorry, r.id.item image. This is an ID, not a drawable. This is the ID from the XML view. So that is this ID that we just created right here. So we are referring to the image view here, and then assigning it so that we have a reference to that image view. And then when we come down here to on bind view holder, this is where we can actually apply that image. So here, just like we did with the text, so we'll also add holder dot, and now we'll do image view. dot set image resource, and the image resource is item dot image resource ID. And the item is the current one, the item at the current position in our data set. And our data set up here was a list of affirmations. So this is finding the image resource ID associated with that instance of an affirmation. So that's how all of those pieces sort of link together. So that should be all that we need. And so now if we run this, we can see if our recycler view has images in it. All right, and here is our recycler view with images and text. The text is quite large now because I increased the font size in order to test the scrolling. So we maybe want to bring that font size back down. So we could bring this down to 16 and then test it again just to see if it looks a little bit better now. All right, so now the text is a bit more reasonable size. So now you can see how to create a recycler view that contains both images and text. And we accomplished this by creating several different classes. We have an affirmation class for an instance of an affirmation, which has a ID for the string resource and an ID for the image resource. We set up our string XML file to include all the strings we wanted to use. We imported our images, and then we set up our data source to reference both the string and the image when creating instances of the affirmation. Then the item adapter handles the bulk of the heavy lifting here, and so the item adapter is what pulls in the individual items and inflates them into the recycler view. So hopefully you found this helpful, and now you know how to use recycler views in Android Studio. Thanks for watching.